A diatonic melody is built strictly from the notes within a single, standard musical scale, avoiding outside chromatic notes. On a piano, this is the equivalent of playing a song using only the white keys. It is a structure defined by absolute simplicity. By the mid-1970s, the dominant global music industry relied on a different architecture. Recording studios in America produced hits utilizing the syncopated rhythms and blues-based chord progressions of R&B and funk. Instead of adopting those prevailing American trends, a singular Swedish quartet engineered an entirely distinct harmonic framework. The members of ABBA are largely remembered through the lens of pop stardom. However, the men behind the music, Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus, approached their work as structural architects, calculating the impact of every harmonic layer. Their global hits are the result of a highly specific synthesis. They combined the regional traditions of Swedish folk music, the sentimental rhythmic structures of German Schlager, and the rigorous mathematical mechanics of Baroque classical music. Stripping away the disco aesthetics reveals an intricate, centuries-old harmonic architecture that dictated their dominance of global pop. The primary cultural input for this architecture is the rural folk tradition of Northern Europe. At the very center of Swedish culture is the concept of the mode. It is a stoic, easygoing melancholy, a collective recognition that even at the height of a bright summer, winter is inevitably coming. For centuries, this specific emotional frequency was carried by village musicians and traditional string instruments. Mathematically, the mode translates directly into the frequent use of the natural minor scale. The natural minor is a 7-note sequence with a specific pattern of half steps that produces a somber, melancholic tone. Analytical, this diagram models the repeating chord progression for the verse of Knowing Me, Knowing You. The underlying structure moves with the stoic, cyclical nature of a Swedish folk ballad. Notice the absence of blue notes. Blue notes are expressive pitches played slightly lower than standard scales, essential to American pop and jazz. Here, the melody line remains purely diatonic, never straying from the foundational scale. This strict mathematical adherence to diatonic structures creates a melody that feels immediate to a modern listener, yet ancient in its construction. The emotional resonance of ABBA's biggest hits relies on this inherently melancholic folk bedrock. In the post-war era, the heartbeat of European radio was defined by an entirely different genre, Schlager music. Schlager had a specific mandate. It was unapologetically sentimental, highly tunable music engineered specifically to encourage large crowds to sing communally. The driving engine of Schlager is the pa foundation, a rhythmic structure that places heavy emphasis directly on the downbeat to create collective momentum. In the track Mamma Mia, this rhythm emphasizes the tonic-dominant relationship. The tonic is the home chord of a musical key, while the dominant is the chord built on the 5th note of the scale. Moving between them creates a tension that mathematically demands resolution. ABBA utilizes the marimba to strike these specific chords, driving an insistent collective movement. They also frequently employ the subdominant, or the 4th chord of the scale. This chord acts as a structural pivot point, providing a bridge away from the tonic that resolves neatly, creating highly accessible, singable hooks. Schlager provided the commercial, communal architecture required to make melancholic Swedish folk melodies digestible for massive global crowds. Because of their accessibility, folk and Schlager structures are frequently dismissed as structurally rudimentary. Benny Andersson solved this problem by applying the strict logic of European classical music to these regional roots. Stripping away the production of Dancing Queen allows us to examine its raw structural notation. Look closely at the walking bass line. This bass line functions as a complex secondary melody, moving mathematically to harmonize with the lead vocal track. This is contrary motion. Contrary motion occurs when two musical lines move in the exact opposite direction in pitch. As the vocal climbs higher, the bass line descends. This specific technique is a fundamental component of counterpoint, the art of combining multiple independent melody lines, pulled straight from the compositional playbook of J.S. Bach. ABBA employed other classical tools to dictate their song structures. This is the circle of fifths, a geometric diagram showing the mathematical relationship between all 12 musical keys based on intervals of a perfect fifth. In the chorus transitions of Waterloo or Mamma Mia, the chord progression steps sequentially through the exact jumps on this classical wheel. Following this classical voice-leading rule creates an inevitable forward momentum that naturally pushes the listener into the next section of the song. This rigorous Baroque mathematical precision is exactly what elevates a simple pop chorus into a grand, immensely satisfying resolution. Later in their career, ABBA expanded their soundscapes to include Mediterranean and global influences, producing tracks like Fernando and Chiquitita. For these records, they deliberately adopted the acoustic rhythmic flavors and percussive stylings of southern climates. Yet, beneath the Mediterranean rhythm, they maintained their foundational math, utilizing the rigorous harmonic clarity of the North. Bjorn Ulvaeus played a critical role in this engineered lyrical and musical fusion, ensuring new influences fit within their established structural boundaries. This final fusion established a definitive Europop template, a musical framework entirely distinct from the Anglo-American tradition of blues and rock. ABBA never attempted to hide their rural folk melodies or their commercial Schlager heritage. Instead, they polished those elements until they reached a state of mathematical perfection. By treating accessible pop music with the architectural seriousness of classical composition, ABBA ensured their work would endure as a permanent part of the European musical landscape.